It's a challenge. Sometimes it's it's too abstract or the words are too academic. But we're going to talk about knowledge. So that makes the language a little bit challenging. So we'll see what you think when we're done. Also, by the way, I would say, for some reason, coming up to this, my mind is going, the room where it happens, the room where it happens, the room, good. Because I'm like, I don't want to say this out loud and no one in the room knows what I'm talking about. I have to say, I am quite proud of that export. That right? Okay. So we're going to talk about architecting emergent meaning. And we will actually explain what this is. And the way we'll get there is we're going to talk about, so an organization needs a transformation. This is predominantly what I do. I design systems. They need a systemic change. So, we need a transformation. Let's get Diana. So here's a challenge, that every system is designed to get the results it gets. Therefore, the call is coming from inside the house. They think this is what I'm thinking about when they hire me to do a systems architecture. But in fact, I will need to architect the ways that people and machines co-create action. They co-create action by sharing information, context, data, attitude, across different circumstances, across different teams, using different tools, and even more importantly, across time. And so what happens immediately is I run into what I call the 6 delusions of unusual size. Right? The fact that we have these ideas about what knowledge and knowledge work is, and it makes it very challenging if you do systems work. And the first one is that knowledge is hierarchical authority, that it trickles down. And the more title you have, the more you know. So this would be, I mean, okay, fine, way the world works. The challenge for me in helping them to have a transformation is that Pirsig is correct about this, that if a factory is torn down, but the rationality that produced it is left standing, then that rationality will just produce another factory. So if you saw the first time I did monolith to microservices, how tightly coupled those microservices are, you would know that I have lived this and done it myself, because our minds structure the way things work. And then when we do something different, we do it a little different, but we still do it the way we know. And so this is a process, right? It's a process. Change is transformation is a practice. And so in order to transform, we're going to need what really is a paradigm shift, right? Meaning changing the mindset out of which this system's goals, power structures, right? Power structures and rules have arisen, because Conway's law is true. The way that the organization structures itself and communicates designs the software. And then the software designs the way the organization thinks and communicates. And when you make a change, you have to change the way the organization thinks and communicates so you can push something different to production, which has a feedback loop of teaching you to think differently. This doesn't make me popular at meetings, depending though on the room. So the truth is that really what I'm going to do is I'm going to facilitate this change, because the whole change my mind cannot, I discourage it. If you play a glue role, a transitional role, if you happen to be female, quite often encouraged to change hearts and minds. No, change your own mind. That's your job. But what I can do is create an ecosystem in which we can do that work, because in fact, it is very difficult to change our minds. I'm very attached to my ideas, and I do not like, if you touch my development environment and put like an alias where I don't have one, I think shot, like that, like gone, like that is like an offense, for a life offense, right? So what I'm going to facilitate is the ability to transfer knowledge, right, in ways that change and shift the system. In other words, we're going to move around the way that time and relationships work in this system. But also what this really means is that complexity has increased so much in the last 25 years. Could I ever have architected an information system? I mean, sure, give me WordPress, I'm all set. I'm all the things. But the systems I work in, I don't know. And also there's an arrogance to knowing. If I didn't code this service in the last 7 minutes, I don't really know how it works. So I partner with the people who know how it works, right? So this is the facilitation, right? Drawing the expertise, drawing the knowledge, drawing the experience out of people in a way that allows us to make decisions and have organizational change. I kind of wish Kubernetes was my problem, and I do like take weekends off and put my headphones on and code to relax, right? But unfortunately, again, to the rest of the Pirsig quote, the true system, the real system, is our construction of systematic thought itself, of rationality itself. In other words, we need a transformation. We need to change our systemic rationality. But can you do it with Kubernetes? Which is very sad to me because I forgot. I intended today to put the AI logos up there because AI, and I forgot until I was all plugged in. So if we could just pretend, just imagine your own personal logo favorite, right? They think I'm thinking, how can AI help them? So we need a transformation. Here are the expectations and requirements, right? Here you go, just go. Because this delusion is that knowledge is command and control, right? If I've figured out, if I've mapped it, then I just need to get people to do it. And this is because we were all educated, and we still work very often in linear thinking, right? Rational, top-down, procedural, predictable, concerned with control. Now, I do want this in my code. I do not want to push code to production that does something completely different. It does anyway, but it's not what I want, right? And so linear thinking, object-oriented programming is a form of reductionism which comes out of this same type of approach. It is not a bad thing, right? We need it and we want it. The challenge is that this had become the definition of thinking. This is the only right way. And the challenge is that this doesn't help us very much in systems design, right? So as complexity increases, we increase our attempt to use this type of approach to build software systems, and we end up with a pipeline that becomes legacy 40 minutes after we push it to production. And sometimes that's okay too, right? But fundamentally, if you don't know what your system is optimizing for, it's probably optimizing for control, right? That's the default, right? And so being able to discern when control is a valuable thing and when control is part of the delusion that we actually control the world and the organic stuff of the, that we are, I don't know, dominant, what is it, this word in Sapiens that I always forget, but if the book Sapiens, whatever he calls it, that's what I mean. And so this also is a very close cousin to the idea that when we think of knowledge, when I say the word knowledge, you might think of winning at Jeopardy. You might think of Wikipedia. Is Wikipedia the repository of knowledge? We think of knowledge and value knowledge as stock, as something that we've developed or that we can access, relational databases, all the stuff we've put in them. And the thing about knowledge stock is it increases your efficiency, right? Being really expert in JavaScript, chances are very good you write JavaScript code faster than me, because I thought JavaScript was a fad for 10 years. So now I'm having to catch up by writing JavaScript every weekend. So you are probably more efficient, right? But the system is never the sum of its parts. It is never the stock. It's the product of their interaction, right? It happens in the relationships within a system. So for example, it is not the MySQL database, it's the queries that's gonna cause you a problem when that's what's gonna make things go down, right? So a system is a set of interconnected components whose relationships produce outcomes. Because this question comes up a lot. What is a system? What do I mean by system? And I say, like, whenever two or more are gathered and have an API, you have a system, right? But WordPress, if you have a logic layer in PHP and a MySQL database in the back, is that a system? According to the words at CMS, which is not a system, it's software, but still, the idea of these relationships, sometimes they don't really matter because they're very straightforward, but in a distributed enterprise system that moves millions of pieces of information a day or a minute or whatever it is, the relationships matter most. So, where I need to leverage skill and activity is a knowledge flow, right? The ability to transfer knowledge in ways that change and shape the system. So for example, I can architect a wonderful system if I know nothing about the business needs or the user needs or the product incentives. Chances are very good that I can make the most beautiful thing in the whole world, but it will be not relevant to anything, right? And so it is, we are greater than the sum of our parts. That's what emergence is. Emergence is when two pieces of software, or two human beings, or more than two, are in relationship with each other, and they do something neither of them could do alone. That's emergence. So it happens at a very low level. As you can tell from my slides, I learned how to follow rules, design rules that are very, very simple but look good, because I suck at design. I mean, no one will let me be on their Pictionary team. I'm like the last one chosen. And so I've had to learn rules. So if I need to show somebody something complex visually, I partner with a designer. And the artifact is emergent because they didn't have the picture of the system in their head. It would be very hard for them to get that. And I have no skill whatsoever to translate that, right? And so together we create something beneficial that helps people understand that we couldn't have done alone. And we want to do that in twos, and we want to do that as for the organization as a whole will succeed based on how effective their knowledge system is. Can your people think well together and do stuff? Is there really more to it? Oh, and have money. And do they have the money? Yeah. So this to me is the art and science of system architecture, is that, you know, Wisdom in Alameda says that you think that because you understand one, you must understand two, because one and one make two, but you forget that you must understand and, right? And is also a human quality as well as a software quality, because again, the software will represent how well we are able to think and communicate together. So the truth for me is that knowledge is relational reciprocity. It means that we're able to have feedback loops and have sharing of knowledge back and forth and contributing different things, but those different things turn into something valuable, and that I can understand how relationships produce effect. For example, if tech hates product and product hates tech, I can tell by looking at the code, right? And that what the organization cannot do, because there's not vibrancy in that relationship, that opportunity cost is often not visible, right? Or often organizations very concerned with command and control keep hiring someone like me who's like, I can, you know, really good. My husband was hired by an organization that I will not be named, but is very big and invented the COVID vaccine. And they wanted to be agile. They wanted to be agile, and he had all this pressure to be agile. They didn't want to be agile. They have one service and another service, and the engineers are like, we'll just let them hit the database. Over my dead body? And he could not convince them, and then eventually they didn't want to be agile anymore. They didn't want to be agile in the first place. But the thing is that the challenge is then, he moves on, right? And we've all been there. And then the organization is like, why can't we change? Why are our relationships so bad? Well, because you chase away anybody who is, or you don't hire people doing that. This is not bad. We're all making these discernments that sort of lead us into a silo, both personally and professionally. But if we start to focus on how relationships produce effect, we're often more likely to see things that are in our blind spot, right? Things that are affecting us that we don't see directly. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. So the way that I facilitate, it sounds so easy, and it makes me laugh, because it's not, like, at all easy. But I'm going to encourage you to experiment with it anyway. And that is that it's synthesizing, right? That's what emergence requires, right? Is this ability to synthesize. This is not alignment. This is not I have to agree with you. This is we have knowledge, we have experience, and together we're figuring out how to synthesize it using sound judgment, meaning I might have experience about a system from a previous role that doesn't fit this. It's the what Netflix does syndrome, right? Doesn't fit this. Sound judgment is what comes into play there. Into recommendations, but not just recommendations, based on valid reasons. In other words, I want you to know, how did I reach that conclusion? Because you might totally get how I reached that conclusion if you were in my shoes and had my experience. But you're not, and you reached a different conclusion that I also could understand if I understood what brought you there. And then we can figure out which of our reasons is wrong, which would be yours, but we can figure out together which of the reasons are wrong and strengthen them together. So usually we're right and wrong, right, wrong, right, wrong. But in fact, often we've just put ingredients on the table, and we can make something with those ingredients if we're going to try and do that rather than this is right, no, this is right, no, this is right, no, this is right, right? Okay, so, or we need a transformation because nobody listens to Steve. So this is where synthesis, remember I said synthesis is hard? There are many reasons, but Steve, high up on the list. So this runs into the delusion that knowledge is a static possession, and Steve has got it, right? Steve's 10x, knows everything, does everything, knows everything. Now, cool. Steve might be great, right? Totally fine. Steve might win JavaScript Jeopardy, which I would think is awesome, right? But here's the problem. In the translation between being confronted with a complex and unfamiliar challenge and the other side of that, where we have something valuable to say, in human systems, there's blame pretty much all the time. This is like a natural human thing, right? And we blame the users, we blame other teams, we blame engineering, we blame product, we blame architecture, we blame the monolith or the legacy system or whatever it is. We blame Agile because apparently Agile is responsible for all horrible things that are happening in the world at any given moment now. Not really sure how that happened, but I think it causes climate change. We've always leadership. We blame leadership for poor leadership. My new favorite is the deep state. I'm just going to keep playing. I'm going to keep playing that one because apparently in my country that actually works as a reason. I don't know what it is, but personally I blame Kubernetes. But that's a whole nother story. And I do think after today, I'm also changing that logo. So you guys will have to tell me which AI logo to put on. Okay, good. Personally, not dissing Claude, Paul, honest, really, but Paul is the well, actually guy. Like, well, I totally understand what you're saying. However, well, actually. So Claude's a little Steve. He's got a little Steve going on. Sometimes you want that, but they're not all the same. So sometimes by Steve. So here's the problem. We don't just blame. We experience something called counterintuitiveness, which means we blame the wrong thing, and then we do the wrong thing. And we do the thing that makes the problem worse, right? That Jay Forrester, was an early leader in systems science and design, went to lots of organizations and discovered people generally know where the pain in the system is, like where it needs a change. And then they're often pushing it in the wrong direction, right? We're inevitably making it worse. And this is all okay. It has to be okay because we don't seem to be able to help ourselves. And so one of the things about architecture and systems design is the recognition that it's a practice, right? That we're going to get through blame, we're going to get through counterintuitiveness, we're going to tightly couple our services to, because Neil Ford or Mark Richards said that there has to be one database per service. And in fact, what would have been for us is one database and 3 services, but we can't do that because O'Reilly book said that you can't do that. And then we figure out that we can, and that's cool, right? But this is how we learn, right? And so this is where it gets a little radical for organizations. But for me, the truth that has most changed really the way that I even think about my own work, right, is that knowledge is shaped by time, energy, and attention, right? It's kind of obvious in the sense that, like, what you pay attention to and what you spend time with, you'll cultivate experience, insight, patterns, these things. So organizationally, what we get is a direct result of how we've shaped our time, energy, and attention. And so there are a lot of things to say about how we can do this better, because we don't do it. We think we're doing it a lot. Remember the linear thinking, command and control, optimizing for control. We are controlling our time, energy, and attention a lot. Got to go back to the office, because at home you might not pay and do the right investment of time, energy, and attention. So we're doing it a lot, but not in a way that encourages the flow of knowledge in an emergent way that actually is going to get the kinds of results that are the most satisfying, beneficial, impactful. So the one I want to focus on, the little amuse-bouche one of doing, is the focusing on capabilities rather than tasks, rather than apparently the number of PRs approved and code pushed to production is a metric of something, not just how much code got pushed to production. And I heard this and it made me laugh. I'm like, I can push a lot of code to production that has nothing to do with anything else, right? Like just pushing code to production. So capabilities are what a system must do or adapt to or make sense of within a domain. So for example, if you think of FedEx fast package delivery, pretty easy to see things like picking up a package, moving it fast, delivering it, not leaving it at your neighbor's house and then have to go up the street in the rain and get it and feel like you're stealing something from their front porch, but the picture you knew was from the potted plant they keep there, right? And so the more that we can together and organizationally focus on capabilities, the more we're going to see the opportunities for transformation. So transformation doesn't scale through procedures and pipelines and Kafka streams and data lake and fire hoses. Those things are useful, but it scales through capabilities. Faster package delivery. What actually accomplishes that, right? What are the capabilities that can be improved or changed? This is not the way we communicate generally. For example, from the engineering team side, we asked to implement the new payment system in 6 months. here's the payment system. This is the one you're going to implement. We decided it'll take 6 months. We don't know why, because we need it in 6 months. Another way we could shape this is reduce cost per financial transactions by 20%. If this is the shape of our goal, you're going to get a lot more shared expertise from the people on the ground that are making this change, that are transforming it, because they're engaging with the problem, they're synthesizing knowledge and expertise. It's very possible that these two things are exactly the same thing, right? Yep, that payment system, we go. But the way we shape the investment, the way we talk about time, energy, and investment can improve or block the flow of knowledge, even though the outcome looks the same. Or we focus on the capability, process, transaction. I need to process transaction. And I understand, because I've built a few systems with transactions in them, it needs to go through. It needs to be relatively fast. I can synthesize with other people, work with other people to understand what makes it good for users. And now we're focused on the capability, but this is where transformation becomes, not that it isn't already a buzzword, but it becomes more of a buzzword. If we can already process transactions, and we're just going to change the vendor, that's not a transformation. That's a change, but that's not a transformation. That's an improvement of an existing capability. So and why I say that is that you don't need the same kinds of support or approaches if you're improving something that already exists as you would if you're going to invent something that doesn't already exist, right? So migrate the pipeline from Jenkins to Circle CI, very straightforward. Or you can be asked to reduce developer toil on pipeline maintenance by 50%. I mean, if I'm the one having the toil, I do probably have some really good ideas about how to reduce it, but more so what to measure. How do you know I'm toiled? I'm over-toiling, right? And what does toil mean? Because often we can say, reduce developer toil, and what we really mean is get them to not have to work on maintenance of the system so that they can build more features. And what really happens is now you're doing both, right? Or deploy updates, right? When code changes, it needs to go to production. So again, these are all three different things, but when you're designing and architecting deploy updates, you're much more out of linear task land than you are when you're migrating pipeline. And in fact, you probably are doing the same thing. But one of the challenges with knowledge is that we tend to have very strict ideas about who has it and who gives it to who and who's allowed to have it. And for me, I have kind of no purpose without everybody else's knowledge and experience, unless I'm going to write all the code myself, right? I benefit, like if I'm cultivating an ecosystem that's an orchard, apples and happy trees, right? Not just because I'm a nice person, I'm kind of a nice person, but I'm a very pragmatic person, and good apples is kind of the point of us doing hard things together. So decouple the front end from the back end. Do we still do this, or do we think we're all decoupled now? No? Does your front end talk directly? Anyone doing BFF? BFF, is that decoupling? I wonder. I think, have we changed the words? Like what Agile meant? I want to know more about that. But big fan of decoupling. Or publish new content, when a content's published, to 4 products or platforms. One publish event goes, in other words, I should be able to write once, and it gets to 4, right? Those are actually very different things. They're different things, right? What you might design are very different things. Distribute content is what you're doing. You've moved from publishing content to distributing content. Now, if I'm in a situation where this is a new capability, content used to go from the back end to the front end, and also to the app, but it went to the app through an XML file that someone in production then put the things together and stuck it in the app, then I might just be making this better. But for a lot of organizations, as information system complexity has increased, they have to move from publishing an event to distributing information. And we are very, very nascent in how to do this because we think of knowledge stock. I have a big website, come to my house, ask me questions, come learn things, read all the things, right? But increasingly, you want information when you ask Alexa while you're cooking dinner, right? So the whole paradigm of what information is and relationships between system parts, these are all changing. And so this, if it's a new capability, this is where it gets fun. This is where you're beginning to really have to dive into transformation. This is going to change the way people think. And what blocks it really often is reductionism, because as soon as we meet complexity, we run away screaming like it's a horror movie, and it's got an axe and all of this, and we simplify, we're going to break it down into the simplest parts so that we can then deliver it, right? That's fine, but also remember the and, right? The and part. Okay. So I'm going to do, okay. So this, my favorite, I have had this, I'm going to. So we build a transformation, we want safe. No, I'm going to make anything, no. No, first of all, not agile, right? Knowledge is just delivery, right? Knowledge is just delivery. So that's me in the doorway. I don't know how to help you. Make it just delivery, right? That knowledge is engineered through learning, that we're going to try things, we're going to learn the things are going to change around us, and this requires having a growth mindset, right? Facilitating the ability for organizations to think in terms of learning, opening to change as opposed to over-controlling, resilience, being able to recover when things change or when we completely fuck it up, which will happen, right? How we do teamwork. And we have done studies with doctors doing diagnosis and discovered that doctors who share information, who swarm and pair, they do better than they do when they're alone, right? And so we know that this ability to have a growth mindset that we're going to figure this out together actually improves what goes into production. And Peter Senge in The Fifth Discipline says that sharing knowledge is about creating learning processes. So when we're facilitating a transformation, what we're really doing is how are we going to learn? Because we don't know. We don't know how to do this, and we're not going to know next month either. And we're not going to know 6 months. We're going to know some things, but we're going to keep learning. How do we engage in a growth learning process? This is essential because as Larry Pruzak, knowledge management professor at Columbia, been to a lot, he's worked at NASA, says that the companies that don't adapt to understanding knowledge as a force of production will slowly die, and they'll never know what killed them. So when they say, hey, Diana, we need a transformation, they don't say, or we're going to die, but it's kind of the case, which is why I take seriously that we focus on what's actually killing them, instead of more Kubernetes. 2 quick last ones. So we need a transformation fast, and also fast and amazing. Like the best plasma, it's not just fast, but also the best thing that ever existed in the entire world, right? Thank you, Sonal, for this quote. So knowledge is efficiency of execution. How fast can you do this? The problem is everything is deeply intertwingled. Ted Nelson actually invented hypermedia, and this is why he did it. All the links that we did not figure out how to intertwingle, that was their point. And so when we think about efficiency of execution, we're like, get from here to there, from here to there. But in fact, it's all wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff, right? And there's the stuff. If you're going to distribute content, You have constraints, you have principles, you have heuristics, you have a glossary because we don't call anything by the same name. What's a title? You have the design, all your design documents, you have the PRs that are in it, you have specifications that everyone's laughing at 6 months later thinking, haha, we thought that's what it was going to look like, right? And so when you distribute content, you have personas, but then you also the personas are interrelated to the product and the platform where they consume them, to the words that they use, to the specifications we thought that they would need, the shapes. It's related to the, what added in this one? I don't think anything. Okay, the architecture-y things, right? The principles, heuristics, event sourcing, whether you push your content in the payload or they have to come back and get it. All the decisions, every architecture is just basically the sum of all micro decisions that got made in some period of time, right? The tools, all of these things are interrelated. I don't mean document. I mean, they are like literally impacting each other, right? And so we're not just architecting the nodes or the pages or the one service. We're architecting the edges, the relationship between these parts. This informs that. This guides that. This enables that. That's how we end up with knowledge as emergent meaning, right? That it arises out of our ability to think across time and to be able to architect relationships as well as a service that actually stays up when we need it to stay up, because I'm not suggesting that we go all relationship therapy and only think about that, but we don't ignore it either, right? And so this came to mind, which I thought, oh wait, better, I left the other one in, is the blue sunflower does not exist. And AI told me that what it means is, it's a symbol of coherence between light and depth, intellect and emotion, meaning flowing through contradiction. So I've decided that that is what a transformation means. And I'm going to move through this last piece because I had it just in case we needed more time. I've not met myself, apparently, not realized that I would actually not have more time. But the last one is about we need Steve because knowledge is pure rationality and Steve knows what matters and feelings are not them. But that knowledge is many ways of knowing, right? In an engineering swarm, you need to be focused on these relationships. And then maybe you decide to model. Then if you're doing a wireframe review, you're looking at the design. And then you're looking at the specification because the designer actually architected a thing that the software knows does not exist in the world of software at all, and you need to iterate and improve on that. And then you start to get into the realm of time, of when and how do these things fit together, and it's wibbly wobbly, and then you get to write some code, right? Then you get to write some code, and the code is impacted by all of these things, right? So I highly encourage you to go forth and knowledge-y and to say, you can just do one tiny little thing, like you do not need to do a transformation based on anything you are interested in today, just the awareness of and, you'll find opportunities that you just didn't see before, right? Just in case.